A very warm welcome to a first tonight. It's our first Magpie Circle YouTube live podcast. Thank you very much for everybody joining in. And we're probably outnumbered by Stockport fans to Notts fans, thanks to one of our guests tonight, Ollie Holt, who you will know as Chief Sports Writer for The Mail on Sunday. And Ollie will be batting for Stockport tonight. Very warm welcome. Glad to have you on board, Ollie. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Paul, as well.
Hey, top man, we are former teammates, Les, in the England media team. I would have you know that travelled Europe. Okay, we've had some big games. We played France and Ukraine. Was that? Ooh, that was 6 years ago, was it, Ollie? Robert Pires.
You'd still make the first team very easily, Les. Don't worry about
that. Robert Pires escaped from me. I was tasked with marking him only 5 times. He scored 5. Okay, but never mind about that. Another very talented scribe. Shame you couldn't have a shave, Lee, but never mind. I think that's you, isn't it, under all that facial hair?
Yeah, lockdown part 2 hasn't been kind, I've got to be honest.
You look good, and glad that you're recovering after your recent heart surgery. So we're pleased to have you on board.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Right, and me, Ollie, and Lee are all wannabes. We all wanted to be pro footballers. I think Ollie did anyway, but we were never good enough. One man who was record goal scorer for Notts County and also a former Stockport player. Give us the expert view ahead of tomorrow. Warm welcome as always to Les.
Evening, Paul. Thank you very much for inviting me on. And I had a fantastic football career, 18 years. I was the lad that was born and bred in Buxton. Miles from anywhere, and I was told there's no chance of being a professional footballer when you grow up. That was my dream, and it happened. Don't ask me how, but it did, and I had wonderful times at Notts County. Rotherham, I was only there for 3 games, so can't really. That was a good time while I was there, but certainly 10 years at Notts County. I had 3 very happy years at Stockport. Didn't really want to leave, but I think the funds had sort of run out once Freddie Pye left. And then I moved on to Wigan. I had a fantastic career, really, really pleased.
Okay, we'll pick up on Stockport in a moment. Ollie's joining us tonight. Now, all the European, all the World Cups that Ollie goes to, lives the dream. But as a young boy, you were taken to Stockport, weren't you? You have strong affinity with the club. Tell us a bit about Stockport, because it's been bad enough for Notts County 18 months out of the Football League. Stockport have now had, a decade out of the Football League?
Yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
I've lost touch with how long it is. I think the last game when we went down was Tranmere. I think it was at home to Tranmere Rovers. I remember being at that game because Tranmere fans invaded the pitch at the end and wrecked the goalposts. And then I was at Kidderminster Harriers game when we were relegated from the Conference down to the Conference North. So yeah, the Stockport's recent landmarks until last season have not been good landmarks. They've been landmarks of decline, really, and it's there have been times when it's felt like an awful long way back. And I must admit there have been, like with many clubs, it's been a testimony to the loyalty of a lot of Stockport fans. I'm not talking about myself, but the efforts that a lot of people have made steadfastly to keep supporting the team, to keep fighting for a time when we can get back and touch wood, things are finally looking up. There's a sort of promotion from the Conference North, National League North last year, and then obviously now the doing okay in the National League. So yeah, it's felt like it's been a long road back, but things are looking up. We've got a new owner, relatively new owner, Mark Stott, who, again, it's early days, but you speak as you find, and he's been absolutely terrific so far, Paul. I think he's done stuff that you don't associate with football owners that much anymore. He's put money into the stadium. We get so used to the stadiums being allowed to become dilapidated, and he's put money into it. I think we've signed some, we've got good players, we've got a good side now. And the atmosphere around the club, sadly, obviously, it's hard to quantify it in some ways because fans aren't allowed in, which is such a shame because I think for the first time in a long time, there is optimism around the club.
You are a proper football fan. It's not just about the glory and all the rest of it. Now, I think when we've been speaking before going on air, you were kind of 10, 11, 12 years old. You've even got some of the old programmes. And there was a blonde bomber at centre forward for Stockport County, wasn't there, Ollie?
There was. Look, I'm a little bit nervous about calling myself a proper football fan because I think when I think of proper football fans, sometimes when I go to Stockport, there's a friend of mine called Fletch who travels up from Torquay, or used to travel up from Torquay to matches week in, week out. I wouldn't say I'm a fair weather fan, but I can't get to, mainly because of my job, I can't get to that many matches. So I'm a bit nervous about calling myself a proper fan because I'm aware actually that a lot of fans do the hard yards that I don't really do. But certainly
You keep your roots, don't you? You're grounded.
Yes, that's true. And my dad, was born in a place called Heaton Chapel, which is part of Stockport, and he started taking me to the games when I was 11 or 12, and which was actually just about the time that Les joined, and that was the first time I got an idea of what community felt like in football at football clubs like Stockport and Notts County, where people, even though my dad wasn't really a football fan, when we walked into the stadium, people would say hello to my dad because they knew him, and he would know people there, and it was the idea of a football club as a community, not just some giant sort of thing where sure who you sit next to at the game and that kind of thing, but generally it's not a community thing. It's it's a bigger thing than that. But I love that feeling of the intimacy of kind of supporting a club like Stockport, which you still get now. I mean, we know what it's like, you still get that now when you go to Stockport, and I love that about it. So yeah, I started going then, and I've had periods through work where I've not been able to go. But yeah, before I keep rambling on, I was looking through some of my programs. This is a program from the 79-80 season, Stockport against Aldershot, and there's the team sheet on the back, and I've written, I was obviously taking down the teams, and I've written the name Brad in there. He wasn't on the actual team sheet, but he's obviously, I don't know, a late sub or something, or we're not expecting him to play, and he was fit. So I've put him in there, and that team had got people that would be familiar to old Stockport fans like Tommy Sword, Eddie Prudham, Osher Williams, some of the great names, and another one with Les's name is actually written in there. But Terry Park was a great player. Phil Henson, I think, played for Man City. So those, as is often the case with your youth, I remember those names, and I remember seeing Les almost more clearly than some of the games from 10 or 15 years ago. That side with people like John Rutter and Andy Thorpe and David Lawson, the keeper, I think used to play for Everton, didn't he, Les? Those names are imprinted on my mind.
Les, I want to bring you in now because it's a lovely story. And Mick McCarthy, who we would all know, uncompromising centre half. So, Les, you got, I should know this, was it 127, 128 goals for Notts County?
I think it's 125 league goals.
Oh, well, I've given you a couple more.
In terms of cup goals as well, it's 137.
Right. But the interesting statistic, among all of those goals, Ollie, Les never, ever got a hat-trick for Notts County. So he went to Stockport, and recount the time, Les, when you're up against a young but a bit gobby, bit lippy Mick McCarthy, who was at Barnsley, correct?
Correct.
And he'd been giving you a bit of stick, and Barnsley were how many up?
The score was 4-1 with 8 minutes to go.
Go on.
And, well, the stick had come from the home match at Edgeley Park, where Barnsley had beaten us by the odd goal 1-0 or 2-1. And he was really mouthy. And he'd had the banter with the fans. They were getting on his back, and he'd take the mickey out of me. You know, I've got you in my pocket, all that sort of talk, general talk as it was in those days to wind you up. And then it came to the big match at up at Oakwell. Barnsley were up at the top of the league. It was the year that they got promotion. It was quite late on in the season, and yeah, they were playing really well, and 4-1 up with 8 minutes to go. And I got threaded a ball through about 35 yards out, and I ran on. Nobody came towards me, so I just let go from 25 yards, and it found the corner. 4-2. And then 1 minute after that, George Armstrong from remember George Armstrong from
the Arsenal winger?
He was playing. He crossed in from the left, and I got up and headed it into the corner, 4-3, and you could hear them then, the Barnsley lads, starting to get a little bit edgy, and then the other one was a cross from the right, another header into the corner, and it's 4 apiece, and we're into time added on, and I nearly got a winner actually at the crossbar as well. Now we came off 4-4. We were delighted, and the Barnsley players weren't happy. Neither was the manager, Alan Clark, the Leeds player in those days, and I was voted into the PFA Team of the Year that year, and I went to the dinner, and I sat on the same table as Alan Clark, and he told me that I'd ruined the day for him, and he got the players in the next morning, and he had them going up and down the Kop for 3 hours. And whenever I bumped into Mick McCarthy after that, and we had a pre-season friendly 2 or 3 years ago, and I bumped into him then, and he always greets me with the biggest load of abuse that you've heard before we break into a smile. Yeah, he's some happy memories, and great memories of playing for Stockport as well. Just how often do you get the chance to play in the same team as Bobby Charlton and George Best? So yeah, Freddie Pye, who was the owner of the club, was well connected, and he sorted out a big fundraiser, charity football match against a foreign team. Can't remember who it was, and he got George Best and Bobby Charlton to play, and I was in the same team, and I'll never ever forget that game.
Very good. Let's bring Leigh in because he's waiting patiently. It's not Stockport tomorrow. You've been down to the presser today, or you've not been down. You've joined on a Zoom call, haven't you? Look, it's early doors. It's 2 big league clubs in the Vanarama League playing each other with the BT Sport cameras. What was your take from today? Is Neil playing it up, playing it down? I mean, how big a game do you think he views this as?
I think Neil's always very measured, isn't he, in his press conferences? I think Notts fans will, immediately tap into that. He never plays anything up or never plays anything down. I think it's straight back down the middle. Personally, I think it's the biggest game in the league this season, across the division, really, given you think this is actually a football league game on paper. So I think, Neil is very cautious in terms of how he approaches games and what he says before them in particular. But I do get the sense in the dressing room they know that Stockport are their biggest rivals in terms of promotion. I know Torquay are currently running away with it at the top, but I think there's a sense, certainly in Notts' dressing room, that if they can get some momentum going, they can chase Torquay down. But obviously, I spoke to Neil today and asked him whether he viewed it as the biggest game in the calendar this year for Notts, and he said no, it's not really about that. It's about staying in touch with the top and staying in contention for those playoff places. As we all know, they went very close last year, and he was very very cautious.
For the benefit of Ollie, we've got a tricky little winger we picked up from Newcastle, Kel Roberts. We call him the Geordie Messi, showing a bit of originality there, Ollie. Now, Kel came out last week, didn't he? Not sure the manager was too pleased to say, I'm hoping to be fit for tomorrow night, which I detect didn't go down massively well with Neil. the inference from today, having watched the interview, is that Kell, which is good news for Stockport, won't be available tomorrow, correct?
Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit too soon for him. And I think it's a shame, really, because in these sort of games, you want to see the best players. I think Stockport have probably got the best attacking midfielder in the league in John Rooney. And Callum Roberts, for me, is probably the best winger in the league. And you want to see the best players out on the pitch. And it's so unfortunate for him because, as you well know, Paul, Callum's been absolutely fantastic since coming in from Blythe Spartans. Got released by Newcastle, which was a bit of a shock, really. But he went down the divisions, scored a few goals for Blythe, he's back at Notts, and we were hoping, big strides from him this season. But unfortunately, obviously, picked up this sort of groin hip problem. Was one of the players that came down with COVID as well, and I think it's taken him a while to get over that. But I don't think he will be included tomorrow night. Maybe at the weekend, but lovely player to watch. Very deftly, low centre of gravity, and has scored some quite brilliant goals since coming to the club.
Ollie, I remember before he passed away having several conversations with Graham Taylor, who I loved talking to about football management. Loved him. And he would often talk about how managers, players would have to cope with the levels of expectation. And there are some clubs where you're at, where the expectation is low and you can siege mentality, get the overachievement. There are other times when you are in charge of clubs where basically nothing less than a title or promotion, you're expected to win 2 out of 3 games, is what it's about. And that puts different mental strengths and stresses on players and managers to be able to cope with. Because I'm interested, because Neil doesn't like to set himself up, likes to play understated, gives huge amount of respects to the opposition, etc. And clearly different managers play it different ways. Now, Jim Gannon, I'm not sure measured is always a word I would use to describe him. I mean, and the owner, are they giving it the big licks this year, or is it a case, because a lot of other people talk about the investment Stockport have made, the players they've signed, that they've got the old Manchester United training ground. Is it a big sense of expectation for Stockport this year or not among fans?
It's the old Man City training ground, I think, Paul.
Sorry, my apologies.
So it's saying
we haven't got one, by the way. We have to borrow a pitch off Forest on the other side of the river. Anyway,
I'm picking you up on that because it was a big thing for us. I mean, a huge thing for Stockport, really. And again, one of the things that the new owner has done. We didn't really have a training ground either. I think we were training at a community centre or something. And look, as you all know, lower down the leagues, I went to do an interview with Sol Campbell when he was at Macclesfield Town, and they're training at a local leisure centre, basically. So in Knutsford, when he was at Mactown. So it's a huge thing for Stockport to have got this training ground. I mean, again, something that will attract players, hopefully, which feeds into this idea that you're talking about, that the expectations, all those kind of things, have raised the expectations. And I think for Stockport fans, in our recent history, that's quite a new thing to have high expectations. I mean, for a long time now, as I say, we've been in decline, and until so we had a kind of, I suppose, effectively the season was foreshortened last year. It was a consolidation season in the National League, but for us to have high expectations is something new. I think we were Stockport were the favourites, probably Notts County second favourites, I'm not sure, but pre-season we were the favourites to go up. I know that, and nothing we can do about that in terms of talking it up. But that was, obviously made some signings. Leigh mentioned John Rooney, Connor Jennings, got a good left back from Hartlepool, Kitching. So there are, we've got a good side, we've got good players. So I think there are high expectations. And I think, from the owner and from Jim Gannon, there is ambition. Obviously, they're ambitious, and you would expect them to be. But I also think, without being boring, we all know what an incredibly tough league it is to get out of. So I don't think there's any thought at Stockport that it's some sort of given that we're going to get promotion. I mean, obviously, there would be a hope that we'd be in the playoff places and fighting for automatic promotion. There'd be the hope of that, but it's already, as you know, as you're finding out and we've found out, I think Stockport have played 9 games, if I'm right. Some teams have already played 13 games because of COVID stuff. So everything's a little bit lopsided. It's a bit difficult to see exactly where we're all at. You know, we had a couple of dodgy results as well. I went to a game earlier on this season that was 0-0. We beat Halifax Town, but I think Solihull Moors was not a particularly entertaining 0-0. So, you know, it's not like we're running away with anything. As Leigh was saying earlier, I think, you know, Torquay United are setting this pace. There are a few surprising teams up there. It'll just be interesting to see how things settle down, if they do settle down. And I hope that Stockport are in the shake-up, but our recent history, like yours, there's not going to be anybody taking anything for granted.
Ollie, I just want to come in because do you think people appreciate how tough it is to get out of the National League? Because a lot of people, I mean, you hear some fans say things like, oh, you know, we're Stockport or we're Notts County. We should be beating the likes of, should be turning up and turning over the likes of Dover. You know, they're no match for us in terms of budget, size of, you know, gates, etc. Yeah,
well, look, I think at Stockport we do, Leigh. I think Stockport fans appreciate that just because things mean, you know, I know that you've had tough times there, but you know, we've fallen a bit further over recent years. And so I think, you know, we spent a reasonable time in the National League North. And so I think there is a realisation of how difficult it is. I mean, look, you know better than me, you look around, not just the National League, but National League North, National League South. Yeah. There are some big clubs down there. Yeah. What we think of as big clubs, you know, fallen... In terms of the lower leagues, kind of fallen giants, you know, I mean, clubs like Wrexham and everything. When I was a kid, you know, I used to go to the racecourse ground with a friend of mine, and you know that they were a decent level league side when I was going to watch them. So I think that it is a real scrap to get out there. And I think anybody who knows anything about the league or has been shoved down into it knows how hard it is to get back up.
From an ex-pro's perspective, Les, you know, both the guys they were talking about, you know, it can be an unremitting slog. How would you assess Notts' progress so far this season? You know, clearly there's a huge number of games to go. Is it a case of how you finish the season rather than you start it? What's your take on it so far?
Well, if I go back to September of last year, my first meeting with the new owners, they were all about trying to get the club playing staff sorted, ready for they would have taken promotion that first season, but it was all about the start of the next season. They wanted to get a group of players, 22 players who could all hit the ground running for the start of this season. And because of the virus, that hasn't quite happened. And then I felt that this season we would be really ready to go. But one thing we haven't talked about are the players. You know, we talk about players missing football. The players are missing the supporters desperately. I love to go out of that tunnel and go and salute those fans that were cheering. I love the buzz of the crowd when you were attacking. I love the adrenaline going when you scored a goal and going, and they're not getting that. And it feels, I mean, I've been fortunate to go and watch a few games at Meadow Lane, and it feels like it's a practice match. It's a Tuesday morning practice game, and when a goal's scored, you're looking around to see, has it been disallowed? There's no noise, and so when you're signing players, are you signing players that can play under those conditions? I read an interesting article before when we first went into the last lockdown by Ian Rush. And he said he would have been absolutely useless to play in this sort of football. He was a poor trainer, but get him out at Anfield with the crowd and he loved it. But he said through the week he wasn't very good. So he wouldn't have performed very well under these conditions. We're seeing strange results at all levels of football. We're seeing players probably performing better than what they do and when there's a crowd not in there. So it is very, very difficult to sort of criticise, for me, the squad, because they're playing in a very strange environment. Do you understand what I'm saying? And you know, we've kicked off. We started. We didn't score in the first game. Then we got going. We didn't have a problem scoring. And then bang, along comes the virus. And of 2 weeks, you know, we were not playing. We came back. We didn't start. It's been up and down. I'm not trying to make excuses in any way. It's not easy to perform under all of these changes. You know, we've had injuries to key players. Very, very strange.
I wonder also, Les, whether, you know, clubs like Stockport and Notts County, and look, to an extent, obviously clubs who are in our division who've come down have fallen on hard times to an extent. Nevertheless, we could count both of these clubs as big clubs in the division. And, you know, Meadow Lane, I'm sure, just like Edgeley Park, would be absolutely banging for some of these. You know, we still get 4,000 or 5,000 for a big game, and the place will be rocking. We'll probably get more this season, or would have got more this season. And so I wonder if clubs like Stockport and Notts County, we suffer a little bit more maybe from the lack of fans, because the advantage we would get from those crowds has been negated.
Absolutely, and I've looked at players, and I think they're, you know, playing for Notts County, I think they're suffering because of what we just talked about. Very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by the psychology of it. I mean, I've no doubt in my mind that some of the strange results we've seen in the league this year are to do with fans, because you just wonder the impact it has on a player. You know, if a player's playing at home and makes a stray pass, the crowd get on his back. Do you know what I mean? They don't have that anymore. They've got nobody to gee him up into shape. So I'm fascinated by this, the whole psychology of how players deal with that, because it must be so strange, you know, especially where the Cop's concerned at Notts. I mean, every time they attacked the Cop in the second half, you always felt, no matter what the score was, that something could happen as a result of attacking that end. It was packed with black and white, but obviously they haven't had that this season.
No, and players are aware of the noise, the build-up, and it kicks the adrenaline, and you're going. But you watch football now, and at all levels of football, teams look to be keeping the ball much longer than they previously did when the crowds were in there. There's an extra pass going on. We're not going to lose it. We're going to keep the ball and knock it about. You don't see passes going astray quite so much, do you?
No.
It's very interesting because you're talking from a player's perspective, Les. You guys from a professional perspective. If I just give like a fan's perspective on some of this as well, because if I wear my fan cap as a Notts man, not as a businessman and all the rest of it. It's great that you can watch the games. Okay, so you can watch all 90 minutes and you can see every moment on all the streams and all the rest of it. It's great. It's great. But football's not just about watching the actual match, is it? It's about the whole traveling. You know, personally, I will enjoy away games probably more than home games because of the travel. You can drive, you can go with your mates, you can go on the train, you know, you get an hour or two around the town, all the rest of it, and it becomes a social occasion. You know, you tick another, you know, tick another ground off what you've watched. And personally, you know, as you know, I was a director for a short period of time at the club, and if you genuinely gave me a choice, being able to sit in theoretically the poshest seat in the house, on the front row of the director's box at Meadow Lane, or being able to and have to wear my suit and bib and tuck and all the rest, or I can go in my grottiest tracksuit and trainers and sit 2/3 of the way down the Pavis at one end, I will give you that every time. And when you travel to one of the things when you go to conference, I call it the conference. One of the things when you go to Vanarama League is you can go. And you can still walk round the ground. Ollie, do you remember this? And so you can walk, and it's terrible. You go to Barrow, for instance, last year, and you can walk round the side, and it's great. you know, I used to stand up and used to love leaning on those crash barriers. You should get a crash barrier on the cop. Used to love that. When Notts were in the top flight, that'd be my place with 3 or 4 of my mates, and you'd lean on that particular crash barrier. That was your territory, week in, week out, and then you could move a little bit or whatever you wanted to do. And I think that's the biggest miss. And daft as it seems, when you're in the Vanarama League, hopefully for a very short period of time, you still get you get a good buzz and a vibe from being at the games, because it is so earthy and so real. Now, don't get me wrong, I want to get back into the Football League absolutely as quick as possible, but there is that earthiness to the Vanarama League and the ability to roam around the ground, stand up, do whatever it is you want.
Well, you know, when I was a kid, or in my teens, my kind of worst nightmare was that Stockport would be relegated from what was then the old 4th division. You know, I thought that would be the end then, really. If they got relegated, there'd be no way back, and that the non-league was this kind of sort of black hole. And then when it did happen, and you know, it wasn't actually as bad as I thought, and it didn't feel like a black hole. It felt like Division 5 basically, and it felt like, you know, and I've really enjoyed going to some of those grounds. I've been to places like Histon, Solihull Moors. I went to Maidenhead United last season. You know, I've been to Stalybridge Celtic. I've been to lots of grounds that I'd never been to before, and really, really enjoyed it. And enjoyed as you say, the ability to walk around the ground a little bit, the friendliness of the experience, the kind of intimacy of the experience, that all of it. You know, I've actually, like you know, I really, really want Stockport to get back into the Football League, but it hasn't been the wasteland the sort of supporters wasteland that I thought it would be. It's been an education for me since Stockport went down, and I've actually really enjoyed, as you say, particularly the away games.
I think, but also I think that enjoyment currently, I think is substantially helped by the fact that Notts County have very good owners, strong funding, a Danish pair of brothers, strong funding, you know, and I would argue not so probably because of those people on a stronger financial footing and better able to withstand the challenges of this pandemic than the 90% of clubs in League Two, certainly. And from what you're saying as well, Ollie, you seem to have an owner that's got his head screwed on, seems to be in it for the long haul, and is running the club in a coherent, efficient manner, not chasing a dream, but trying to set his stall out to be professional and create a framework that gives you the best chance to succeed.
Well, I think so, Paul. And as I say, you know, you speak as you find, and I think everything that he has done so far has been, you know, beyond reproach, frankly. And look, we all know what a topsy-turvy world, fickle sort of world football at all levels can be. But, you know, so far, I mean, I've like Les, I've been lucky enough to go to a couple of games and been shown around the stadium, and I've seen some of the improvements that have been made to the ground already. And, you know, I'm a bit of a ground nerd. I love football grounds. I love old football stadiums. I went up to Wraith Rovers a month or so ago. I've never been to that. Absolutely fantastic old stand at that. I love stadiums. And to me, you know, Edgeley Park is the soul of Stockport County. And I would hate it if they ever moved away. And so to see the work that Mark Stott has done on the stadium, as say, I had a little walk around some of the work he's done at the Cheadle end, you know, just the general improvements that have been made are just, they sort of, without being overly soppy about it, they really gladden my heart, to be honest. And I think any Stockport, again, the sadness is that Stockport fans have not been able to see that yet. And I think when the time does come, hopefully later this season, when fans are allowed back in, and in our case, Stockport fans see the work that's been done, it'll be a huge boost, really, because, it's been a long time since the club has had real love. It's had a lot of good intentions from some people, bad intentions from others, I'm afraid, but good intentions from some nonetheless. But there feels now as though there are good intentions coupled with a will and a wherewithal to try and make it right. And as I say, there is a real feeling of optimism around the place that stems from the new owners and the people that he has hired, the people that he has got in place, the people that are supporting him, the work the club is doing in the community. It all feels, I'm really tempting fate now, but it all feels like it's pointing in the right direction, which is the first time it's felt like that to me for a long time.
Alexander and Christopher Reitz are our co-owners. Les, now, after the terrible defeat against Harrogate in the Wembley playoff final last season, you went along to a kind of a private function with the players hosted by the owners. And I think you'd said to me you were very impressed by how they kind of set their stall out of what we're going to do this season, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the players, the manager, the backroom team, and the probably, I don't know how many staff there was, probably 10 staff, all very, very disappointed after the result. But we all got an invite to a hotel, which is about 4 or 5 miles down the road at Cricklewood. And we went in there and food was laid on and we had a drink. And as you can imagine, it was a very somber occasion. And around 8 o'clock, Christopher got up and said, "I'd like to have your attention." And he thanked everybody at the club, the players, the manager, backroom, all of the staff for their efforts that they've been put in trying to get promotion. He said that they never honestly believed that we could have finished in the position that we did. They thought halfway would probably be satisfactory that year, but I'd say they were all about getting the club on a firm footing, ready to start the next season, getting the squad together of 22 full-time players, few possible loan signings, having a full pre-season, 6-week pre-season, and then hit the ground running at the first match. Well, because of the virus, that didn't happen. So, and it's been a little bit bitty, hasn't it, with the break, with the virus coming into the club, and then a few injuries. Yeah, they've had a tough time, but they've been tremendous guys. I mean, Notts County, behind the scenes, the club's operating like probably a Premiership club in terms of the virus. The players, the backroom staff are being tested on a weekly basis, and the staff. When I get an invite to go there, it's like going into a prison. You're met at the gates. You've got to have the test. You've got to put the mask on. You've got to go through a side door away from where the players go. That's a red zone. There's only them that can go in there. Everything is done absolutely spot on to try and reduce any chance of infection. So I've got nothing but great admiration for the owners. They're doing a fantastic job down at Notts County.
Leigh, you've had an audience with the guys, and their background with their business, Football Radar, supplying statistical information to companies such as betting companies, and so they have a vast bank of European football data. And clearly it's probably dumbing it down too much to say Moneyball approach, but certainly there has been folders, files passed on to Neil targeting the European market as well as the domestic market. How did you find Alexander and Christoph when you were speaking to them? How did you take to them?
What I really find impressive about them is, as we all know, football is a very, very emotive game. You only have to look at social media now before and after games. But what I like about them is they seem to park that to one side. They don't seem to act on emotion. So, to give you a bit of insight, for instance, is that they do a fair score table of all the games that Notts County play. So they put all the data and compare it with the other teams in the league based on XG, etc. And they draw up a table to see where Notts would be in this fair score table. Now, currently, Notts County should be second in the league in terms of chances created, etc. So I've been really impressed with them. I think they're very methodical, very understated. They don't really covet the limelight too much. They speak when they feel they need to speak, which I think is always a good thing. And they have got a very bold ambition for the football club, which is, as we've seen, is to try and unearth these talents that perhaps are underappreciated in the market, and they apply the data very much similar to how Brentford have done their model. Callum Roberts, prime example of that. Plucked him out of Blythe. I think he'd scored 19 goals, took the plunge, and they've been rewarded now. I think you'd look at Callum and probably say he'll earn Notts County a lot of money. And I think they've done the same with Ruben Rodriguez and Eli Sam. Try and invest in those players who perhaps teams would overlook, but they've got the data which suggests that they would be very good signings for the team, but also have the ability to progress and perhaps in the future, earn them a lot of money. So I'm if I'm a Notts County fan, I'd be very excited about, the future. They run the club very, very well.
Ollie, don't want to put you on the spot, and we're all about being constructive on these podcasts. So,
yeah.
But you did do a big interview with a former Notts County chairman on probably one of your last visits to Meadow Lane. You came to interview Alan in what were very, very difficult times for the club, both as a club, personally for Alan, his businesses. What did you make of that interview? What did you make of Alan? Because clearly you have interviewed the biggest names in football all over the world, and you will have seen a whole range, a whole gambit of people in football. Yeah. What did you make of Alan from that interview?
I really liked Alan, Paul, and I felt that Alan's tenure in at Notts County was just one of those things that it almost felt there was a lot of bad luck involved. I felt, and look, I obviously don't know him as well as you or as Leigh or whatever. I felt he put a lot of love into Notts County, and I felt that, sorry, these are cliches, I felt his heart was very much in the right place. He wasn't a guy who was looking to make money off the club, the opposite probably, actually, as it turned out. He wasn't an asset stripper. He wasn't one of these guys who goes in and destroys clubs, of which there are many. He really, really wanted to, he wanted the best for the club. He wanted the best for the fans. I think he desperately wanted to be liked. Maybe he wanted that too much. I don't know. And, I think maybe, and it's obviously this is easy with hindsight, he made a couple of bad decisions. I don't know, a couple of bad hires, some poor signings. Who knows? But I mean, again, I had a look around the stadium when I was there. You guys will be able to tell me more than this. I mean, he appeared to have put quite a lot of investment into I remember looking at the changing rooms. That corridor outside the changing rooms was lovely. There were kind of black and white tiles and everything. And as Les was referring earlier to the kind of Premier League feel around the club. I mean, when I was in that stadium, you're in League Two then, but when I was in that stadium, that could have been a Premier League ground, and it felt like there was a lot of love involved for the club. Obviously, things went awry, and when things go awry like that, I mean, I felt for Alan, because clearly at that point he would have, we all know what football clubs are like, and how when things go wrong, the fans can be fairly unforgiving. I know that he got a lot of abuse, and I just, I think it didn't go right, and it was obviously a very bleak time in the club's history. But I just think it wasn't for the want of trying. He had good intentions, and maybe he didn't have the skills, whatever. But the bottom line for me was he had good intentions, and a lot of people who own clubs don't. And I just felt it was a sad story the way it ended up.
I think that's a very accurate and a very, very fair summation. I want to ask you about another Notts County person who you helped write a book with, because clearly this man is still reverential among Notts County fans. So Neil Warnock, okay? So we'll just dive off Stockport for a minute, if we may. So Neil, so you ended up writing a book. Tell us a bit about Neil from your perspective. How did you get on with him?
Well, I've always got on very well with Neil. I didn't know Neil early in his career, but he and I ended up, when he was at Sheffield United, he and I ended up on some, sort of low grades chat show of some sort, talking heads, and we just hit it off. We got on well, and we connected. I ended up doing a piece with him where I actually sat on the bench with him at Sheffield United when they played Ipswich Town at Bramall Lane. I think it was one of the last games of the season one year that they got into the playoffs at Sheffield United. They were in that was in the Championship. Anyway, Neil and I got on well, and so when it came time to do his book, he asked me to do it, and I absolutely loved it, to be honest, because, as you know, sometimes I've done books with people in football who are young, who made young players who are really just starting out on their career, and obviously they're high profile and they've done some fantastic things. But Neil this is probably 10 years ago when I did that book, but Neil had already had a very full life in football, and had some, anybody who knows Neil, any Notts County fan, he's a fantastic raconteur. He's what Paul and I and Leigh in the business will call a great talker. And he's he's a terrific talker. It's not like you have to coax the words out of him. And I love the stories that he had, stories about taking Gainsborough Trinity to sort of Wootton Blue Star and, all these great names in sort of lower league football. And look, as far as Notts County, obviously he had, immense affection for Notts County. And I remember one story that was in the book he told me, which I'm sure will have heard about, that I think it was on the eve of the cup game against Man City in the early 90s, was it 91? Yeah. Anyway, well, I think it was snowing. It was a third round, was it, or fourth round? It was snowing, yeah. And
taking them sledging.
The sledging, yeah. He took the players. They did a press day at the park, and the players were sledging. And I think two of the keepers were on the same sledge, and very nearly went sort of hurtling into a tree about 50 miles an hour. And Neil saw the kind of the headlines flashing before him. And anyway, they just missed the tree. I think Steve Sherry will be one of them. I guess, was he? And anyway, so Neil was just full of stories like that from everywhere he'd been, and I found it interesting. Les, you'll have to remind me of this, but it's funny how obviously names keep cropping up. So his manager, I think Neil's first manager when he started at Rotherham or Chesterfield was Jimmy McGuigan. Was he there? Was he there when you were there? Did he sign you?
He took over from Mike Summerby after Mike Summerby got the sack.
Yeah.
Jimmy McGuigan came in, and he was manager.
Yeah. Neil, I think he let Neil go, so Neil didn't have massively fond memories of him. I think he portrayed him as rather a dull sort of Scot, but no, he was just just that tapestry of lower league football that Neil talks about. I loved all that, and he had some great, just a great raconteur. Really lived a very like Les, lived a very rich life in football.
You just reminded me, we had Bob Worthington on one of my podcasts 2 or 3 weeks ago. Bob, brother of Frank, 3 footballing brothers, yeah. All became professional footballers, and Bob would be left back, Neil would be right winger, playing for Rotherham and Chesterfield. And in those days it was kind of accepted that the fullback tried to do the winger, but the winger would always jump up in the air and try and get out of the way. Neil pioneered a system, whereas the right winger, he will get the preemptive over the top tackle in on the fullback right before the fullback could get one in on him. And
kind of Mark Hughes philosophy, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. You can get away with that. You can get away with
Mike
that.
Summerby.
Yeah, nothing new. But on one occasion, I think Neil had done someone in the reserves, and so Bob Worthington's gone and cleaned him out and sent him about 8 foot up in the air. But yeah, now one of Neil's great strengths was the ability to build camaraderie in a team. Les, you would have seen that both on the pitch and off it with our ex-Notts Players Association, with when you honoured that Neil Warnock team. Talk to me about how everyone turned up. Neil gave the speech.
Well, obviously, I'm involved with the Former Players Association and helped to organise an annual dinner to celebrate good times with individual players or teams. And we wanted to recognise Neil's team that got promoted twice, and it was just incredible. There was 2 players out of the whole squad that couldn't make it. One of those was Chris Short, and he was abroad on holiday. And there was the other one. There's one other that couldn't make it, but every single one. Even Mick Jones was up in Scotland, I think, watching a football match in the afternoon, and he drove down to be there as well. It was just an unbelievable camaraderie that he created with his team, and it was interesting that we had him earlier this year before he got the job at Middlesbrough on a podcast to celebrate the 30 years since they won promotion in the playoffs, and both Tommy Johnson and Craig Short said he was the best manager that they'd ever played for in the way that he could make every single player play that little bit better. That was his achievement. His aim was to get a little bit more out of each player. He was very good at issuing out good balkings as well at times, they told us. But he made them, before they went back on the pitch, he made them feel like they were the best player in the club. They said he was a fantastic motivator.
And when he did that podcast for the club, he dug out, Ollie, his old Wembley suit. So this is 29 years since. I tell you what, he must have had it tailored, Les, because it still fit, didn't he? He must have let the vents out at the back, because when you look at him on that 91 video and you look at him, he's put a couple of pounds on, hasn't he? Yeah, proper suit.
And he had a signed shirt behind him on the wall, didn't he?
That's right, and he put the shirt Wembley flag up in the background. It looked nearly as good as them orange curtains you got there, Les.
I feel a bit envious of Les's backdrop, actually. He's very clear. It makes you stand out, Les. I need to get something like that.
Well, it wasn't so good on my iPad, so I changed. They're actually red. I don't know why it's coming out that colour, but there we go.
You can't have red. We've doctored it. My lad who produces all these, it's just airbrushed it orange. Can't have red. Can't have red. Leigh, let's just finally get back. Thank you ever so much. It's been brilliant tonight. So tomorrow you will be at the game, won't you? Les, will you be at the game tomorrow?
All being well.
Yeah. So what are we going to see tomorrow then, Leigh? What are we going to see?
I think it's going to be a great game. I'm really looking forward to it. I think as Ollie's already touched upon, Stockport got some very, very good players. Mark Kitchen, I saw at Hartlepool last season, very good fullback. John Rooney up front. I don't think we've mentioned the lad up front, Alex Reid, who did well for Dagenham last season and scored against Notts. I think it will be a fantastic game. It's just a bit of a shame that Callum Roberts won't be fit, but I still think Notts have got enough players in the team that can go and hurt Stockport and vice versa. I think tomorrow night's game will all hinge upon how Stockport approach the game. I think, as we've seen, when teams come to Notts and put men behind the ball, that's when Notts find it a little bit tricky. But if teams go at them, as such as Weldstone and Barnet tried to do, they found themselves cut open. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think it'll be a great occasion. And may the best team win.
I'm guessing Jim Gannon will have the boys wired up, Ollie, yeah?
Yeah, I'm sure he will, Paul. As you say, he can be... we talk about Neil being able to dish it out. I think Jim Jim, every Stockport fan would be aware.
He's on his 11th managerial stint at Edgeley Park, isn't he?
Yeah, I know he is, and obviously a former player as well. So I mean, he's an absolute stalwart. But yeah, I also think it should be a good game, and yeah, we have got some terrific players. I mean, Leigh mentioned Alex Reid there, who's unreal. Is in great form at the moment, and I think will be one of the dangers. It should be, I really hope it's a terrific game, and it's great that it's on BT. I mean, there've been a couple of games. I've been lucky enough to go to a couple of games this season, a couple of the home games, but I think the Stockport's game at Chesterfield was on telly. There's been a game on the Red Button in the FA Cup, and so it's been great to see again Stockport, but we've been starved of that kind of stuff. So even to have a presence in a game like this on BT Sport is great. It's a sign, as I say, for us. I know you're getting used to sort of being in this division, but for us, I think for Stockport, it's a sign of another sign of recovery, basically.
Guys, thank you ever so much indeed. Really enjoyed the chat. Ollie, thank you ever so much for joining us tonight. It's been great insight. Leigh, thank you very much indeed. Les, I'm jealous of you two because you two will be at the game, won't you, tomorrow? I will be watching on BT. Me and Ollie will probably be watching on BT Sport, unless Ollie's, well, I was going to say jetting around the world for a big name interview, but clearly you don't do any of that at the moment.
No, I'll be watching.
Guys, thank you very, very much indeed. And look, may the best team win. And we won't argue about who's champions and who goes through the playoffs. But it would be nice if both of us could be back playing in the Football League next season.
Can I just say, Paul, before you finally wrap it up as well? I mean, obviously, it's a pleasure to be on with you and Leigh, but Les is genuinely one of my first football heroes. It was a real pleasure, Les, to be on with you, and a real thrill for me, and to be able to speak to you and hear some of your memories. So thanks very much for that.
Hey,
thank you very much, Ollie. Hopefully we can meet up at Stockport in the new year.
That would
February,
be lovely.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I'll look forward to it.
Yeah, Ollie, I can't believe that when Les wrote his book, he didn't ask you to write it. I can't believe it.
Well,
hey,
he didn't. I don't think
scandalous. But I tell you what, Les will do.
That I was a Stockport fan, or else I'm sure he would have put that right.
Hey, but hang on, if you talk nicely to him now, I'm sure now you've described him as one of your heroes, Les will send you a complimentary copy, won't you, Les?
Well, maybe he can bring one to Edgeley Park when we hopefully when we're allowed there. That'd be nice.
I'll definitely do that.
Guys, thank you very much indeed. Thanks again. Take care, all.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Take care.